right, are you ready to reveal?
Let's do it.
Hi, and welcome back to Beginning Quilting with Maddie. I'm Angelique, and today we are going to finish your last block, which is the Sawtooth Star.
Very exciting.
So before we get started on that, let's talk about the one that we worked on last time, because I, again, sent you with some homework, and that was the old windmill. So what'd you think?
Yeah, it was really fun. I feel like this one didn't come out quite as cleanly as the broken dish block did, but I'm still pretty happy with them.
So what method for the sewing the points did you try, and which one did you like the best?
Yeah, well, truth be told, I kind of forgot that that I might have some problems sewing the corners there. So I did have the machine eat one corner of one of my triangles, and I panicked for a second, but then I remembered our paper method.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I ended up taking that triangle after I got untangled from the machine.
You had a hungry
thread.
machine.
Yes, and I put it on the paper and put that through, and that worked great. I had no other problems, but for most of it, just because I am kind of lazy, after I did that first one with the paper, I just did the chain piecing, and it seemed to work okay. So, yeah.
Was there anything else that maybe you learned in this block that we didn't learn before?
Well, it sunk in how important it is to properly press your blocks. You could see here my corner piece on this square. We lost the point a little on this one, and I learned that the reason that happened is because I didn't do such a great job pressing.
Yeah, you can see it's a little folded over there.
And so when you're working with such tiny little margins, it really matters to make sure that you press properly. So take your time on your pressing, guys.
That'll also be really important with what we're working on today. So today's block is the Sawtooth Star. This is a really fun block, but it's different than the last two blocks in the final assembly. So with this block and with the broken dish, we sewed 4 different pieces, sewed 2 pieces together, and then sewed those together. So it all assembles in the center. Whereas this block, we actually have 3 pieces to it. So we're actually gonna, what I'll call columns, because I have a tendency to look at it this way.
Yeah.
But basically we have 2 side pieces and a center piece. And so that's gonna change up a little bit how we sew certain things together to get this look at this block. I'm also gonna show you 2 different methods and how to make the flying geese. So your Sawtooth Star is made up of these flying geese units. So they're not just your typical triangles. It's a totally different method than the way that we were sewing other triangles on. And then you have these other block shapes here. Would you like to know a little bit more about like the Sawtooth Star and its history?
Yeah, hit me.
All right, well, one of the reasons it was called the Sawtooth Star are these parts here that we're using resembled, when they started to kind of name this, other things that were in their environment, like a saw for a tree. And so this reminded them of the teeth that are on those saws. And I'm like, I could see that, because I'm sure a lot of people weren't near the ocean and couldn't necessarily see shark teeth. So I could kind of see where that came from. It has a couple other names. It's called the Morning Star or the Evening Star. It's also called the North Star. And this is also one of the older original types of blocks that are found on a lot of like older quilts.
A classic.
It is a classic. Like I mentioned, it's made up of of course the other blocks, but this is its own block as well. So you're going to learn about how to make flying geese, which we're going to use in this arrangement, but in the arrangement where you have a flying geese next to a flying geese all the way through, that indicates the direction the geese are flying. And if you ever wanted to know, this inner triangle or the bigger triangle is actually the goose. Right? And so the point is the head or the direction it would be flying, and these parts here. And the reason I tell you this is I was like, I don't see a goose in this. Where are the wings? But this is the whole bird, and this is actually the representation reflection of the sky.
I see. See, I would have guessed that those were the wings.
That's what I used
Yeah.
to think too. So that's what's been kind of fun about learning about this is
Yeah.
also that. The first time it was actually called the Sawtooth Star was in that Farm and Fireside magazine that we've talked about before in 1884. That was the first time they got that name. This was also a communication tool in quilts that were used in that Underground Railroad, just like your first block. And it basically indicate travel towards the North Star.
Makes sense.
So there's a lot of history. I just find it really fascinating how you were drawn to some of these, original blocks and these older blocks and the history that they've had with that.
What can I say? I've got old-fashioned taste, I guess.
All right, so a couple methods, like I said, we're going to learn. We're going to learn the traditional method of piecing, which we have a couple of blocks ready to go for that.
Okay.
And this is the one I did originally as I was trying to get the sizes using that traditional method. And as you can see, one of the really important skills here is a little bit more precision in the cutting and in the sewing.
Wish me luck, everybody.
You'll do fine. You're doing great. Because you can see I was playing with the sizes that I needed to kind of come up with our cutting for this, and you can see like when I cut it back, I had to cut down to the 12.5, and you can see I don't have an edge here like I do on this side. So when I go to sew this on another one, I'm going to lose those points. So we shouldn't really have to trim down. When we finish, we should be at the 12.5. So this isn't like the broken dish where we had that space to do that. And then I'm going to show you the sew and flip, which is my favorite method. And we'll talk a little bit about the pros and cons of each method, because some people like certain ways and some like the others. But I'll show you both because, you're going to come across those. But I think it's important to kind of see what makes up that flying geese.
Yeah.
All right, so for the traditional method, all of our centers are going to be 6.5-inch squares. So that's easy. We needed 2 for this one and we needed 3 for the other one. You're also going to need to cut some corner squares. So we cut 8, so 4 for each one of the 3.5-inch square corners. And then for the parts that are going to make the flying geese, we needed a 3 7/8, right?
Very
block.
specific.
Yes. And then for the larger one, we needed 7 1/4. So to me, that's actually one of the cons of the traditional method is kind of these odd sizes to get to the other one. I like quarters and halves and 3/4. When I start getting into the 3/8 and the 7/8 and stuff like that, I struggle, even though it's marked very clearly on here. I get drawn to those larger lines when I'm cutting, and so that to me is one of the cons of this. One of the other cons of this, as we get into kind of the cutting, is you're going to see we have created points again to sew, and you know how that,
We saw how that went.
yeah. So that to me is also another con, but we do have some methods to kind of deal with that as well. We'll get to that cutting in a second. And then some of the pros compared to the sew and flip method that I'm going to teach you is once you cut, you're ready to sew. There's no drawing. We're going to have to do some drawing on the squares of the other method. And the other pro is we don't waste as much fabric. So there's a lot less fabric waste because with the other method, you cut after and then you have these triangles that are left over. And what do you do with those? So if you're concerned about, how much you spend on fabric and, it's like, I only want to use this fabric for this project and then I'm done with it, then this might be the method for you.
Right.
Okay. So we're going to start with that method. So the first thing that we need to do is we're going to take our larger block and we are going to cut on the diagonal this way and this way. So if you'll just pass me either of those, whichever one you don't want to use.
I'll take the comfort cutter.
So cut across the diagonal and then you're going to cut across the diagonal again. So you're going to get 4 triangles.
Okay.
And as you can see, those look like your geese, right?
Not the sky, as
Not
we
the
learned.
sky.
We got them.
All right. So with these, we're going to cut them on the diagonal once.
Okay.
So now we can start actually lining up, and sometimes I'll do two, depends on how big my design board is. But now you can get kind of a sense for how they're going to come together.
Oh, these fabrics look so cute together.
They do. I was so excited to finally get to use the mint.
The mint is so cute.
So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to fold over one of the triangles.
Oh, I see. You stacked yours.
I did, just for space. So there is something a little unique in how we're going to set this up. So once we fold this over, we want one point, which is going to be your lower point here, to line up on the edge here.
Okay.
Okay, can you see that?
Yeah.
And then this one's going to overlap.
Okay.
Okay, because that's going to help us create the point. We'll get those dog ears that we'll cut off again.
Yes.
Okay, so once you get that lined up, we can clip our pin in place.
Perfect. Okay.
And then we're going to sew that. So let's prep all of those so we can chain stitch them.
Yeah.
But notice we're only doing one side at a time.
Just the one side.
Just the one.
Fair enough.
All right. So just head over to your machine when you're ready.
Okay.
So the points and the method that you choose. I would, because you've got this point here, you could either do the short start.
Oh, yeah.
Or the paper would be good to get that started, and then chain stitching, just watch this point because you only have one single.
Yeah.
You could do it this way, but I find it a little bit harder because my triangle is covered, to make sure that my triangle is lined up properly, okay?
Okay.
All right, so now we're gonna go over to the pressing station, and what
Okay.
we need to do is we need to press this nice and open and flat, okay?
Yeah.
And it's important direction of pressing, so when we go to put it together later, so we're gonna push it so that the sky, we're pushing against the sky side.
Okay.
Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right, so let's go press.
Let's do it.
Okay, so we pressed. One of the things I like to do, and I kind of did it before I went, is I like to finger press it over, and I'll just flip it over so you can see that your flying geese unit is on top of is the top part of that seam, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're ready to do the next side. Either method, you have to press in between. If you leave it like this, and you go to sew this one on, guess what happens? You can't open it. Have I done that before?
How did you learn this, Angelique?
So same thing as we did before, we'll just line up the bottom, we'll have an overlap of the point at the top.
Okay.
Right, so once it's pinned or clipped in place, we're gonna sew just like we did last time.
Okay.
And then meet you back here after ironing.
Yep.
Okay, so we pressed our blocks. Let's go ahead and trim off our dog ears, or since this one's sitting at the top of it, I'll call it the beak.
Very good.
Wah, wah. All right. So just carefully want to trim that off at the top because it's just going to create some bulk for us later, and
Yeah.
we're going to trim it anyway, so this is a good time. Okay, so that was the traditional method of making the flying geese. What did you think?
So far, so good. I mean, I don't feel like mine came out quite as perfect as they maybe should have, so hopefully that doesn't bite us later.
All right, so I'm going to show you the next method. This is my preferred method. Some of the pros on this one is that you're not going to have to sew points.
Oh, that
So
is a
I
pro.
really like that. You also have a little bit more wiggle room in that you can sew a scant 1/4 of an inch and just kind of trim the excess. So what's really important is that your rectangle here, which is going to make your goose, is the right size.
Okay.
Right? So I don't have to be as precise with these. If they're a little larger, fine, I can trim the edges off. So that's one of the things I like about it. So no points, none of that. Cons, I don't think that this is a con. Some people might, but there's a lot of drawing. I've got to draw the diagonal so I know where I'm going to sew it. Okay. You can draw them all at once, or you can draw as you go. I'm kind of a draw as I go girl. And that's because I don't love monotony.
Yeah.
So if I'm doing the same thing over and over and over again,
tedious.
it gets tedious, and I need to change things up. So, you know, some things, you know, it feels faster to me. Other things I feel like if I've completed something, then I feel like I've accomplished something. So it's a personal preference. Right? So you have to really think about your placement. So the first one doesn't matter, okay? Whether I did it this way,
that way.
the first one, it won't matter. So, okay. As long as I line up a corner to corner, and then I'm gonna sew that. It's the second one where you have to think about it, because if I do the same thing, I'm not gonna get it. So that's one of the cons about that, is really thinking about, you know, since I'm using a square versus a perfectly cut triangle where I just know I'm matching up that hypotenuse, right?
Right.
The other thing that makes this a pro is that, unlike the way we did this, because we had to cut an angle, which creates a bias, and biases can stretch, and that's where you can get some of those, what happened, right? So that's where you kind of have to be careful with that. But I'm not going to have a bias here when I'm sewing, so I'm not going to really create as much stretch. When I'm done is when I do my cutting. So just like we did before, we'll do the scant. The scant 1/4 inch needs to be on this side. Okay, not this side. Right. Because then remember the side that's folding over. This is going to go away. Okay? But lining up is easier. The other con with this is the waist, because I'm going to lose fabric that I'm going to, you know, do something else with. Doesn't bother me because I like to do scrappy quilts, but other people might be, I don't want to buy all this extra fabric, because you definitely do have to buy a little extra fabric for this method.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
All right, so same thing as we did before. You can clip wherever, just so it stays lined up, and we'll sew those 4 on. All right, so before we press, this is where we're going to cut our seam allowance. And so on the sewing line, not the line you drew since we did a scant, we are going to line up the 1/4 inch marking on our ruler, again on the sewing line, and we're just going to trim off that excess.
Perfect.
Okay. And then we will fold over and press.
Cool.
Now, one of the things that you can do, and I didn't do it on this one, but before you cut, if you know you want to use these for another project for half square triangles, what you can do is you can actually draw where your 1/4 of a line is going to be. So let's say I draw 2 lines. Right? I have my sewing line, and then I draw another 1/4 here, which I'm going to cut, and I draw another 1/4 here, and I can sew. So this is the one I'm going to cut, right? So if I sew on this line,
then they're already together.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a way you could kind of pre-prep them for small ones. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with these, so I didn't worry about it. But that is a way where you can feel like you're going to do more with this later and not waste the fabric and kind of pre-prep it. Okay. So just like before, once we folded it over and we cut off the edge, we have the one side. So what do you think so far of this one?
I really like that I don't have to cut off the dog ears separately.
Right, because it happens when you cut off the triangle.
It feels a little less fiddly.
So now we're ready to do the other side. So this is where we just need to be careful on our arrangement so that we get a point, right? We don't want it to go parallel.
Right.
Because then we get a totally different look, which is there are blocks that do that, but this isn't that block. So scant, 1/4 inch, trim your seam allowance, press, and we'll have completed flying geese.
Awesome.
All right, so That is the other method, which was called the sew and press, because we sewed, cut, and then press.
Yeah.
Right, so that's, or the flip and press, or the sew and flip, or,
I think I like this one a little bit better. It feels a little cleaner this way to me.
Okay, well, I'm gonna steal those from you.
All right.
And I just wanna stack those with theirs. So now we're ready to assemble. This wasn't all just about the flying geese block, right? Now we're ready to actually assemble your Sawtooth Star. So you wanna take a look at what the pattern is before we get started on
Yeah,
that?
let's make sure we know what we're building
Yeah,
here.
so we can take a look at it here. All right, so we prepared the flying geese for both units. We have 2 of the minty ones to make and 3 of the non-minty ones, of the orange ones to make. So I'm gonna make one of these, you'll make one of these, and I'll send you home with homework for the other ones, okay?
Perfect.
So that's how we're gonna lay those out. So remember I said at the beginning, we have 3 sections that we're going to be making. We have 2 sides and a center. So let's start with the center first.
Okay, and that's the big block.
That is the big 6.5 inch block for this size that we are making. And so this is where we have to think, because when we got done, both of our long edges here should be 6.5. We want the points, so that we want the sky going outwards.
Okay.
Right? And we want the bird facing inwards.
Right.
The head of the bird facing inwards. And that will be on both ends. So top and bottom.
Cool.
Okay. And so we're gonna go sew those in place.
Awesome.
Just be careful when you go over this part here.
Yeah.
Because you got a lot of seams there and you wanna keep that seam allowance.
Right.
And again, double check, because there is a time where now and again, I put one on backwards, which is a different block. So,
Yes, we gotta be careful.
so that's why I like to line them up and flip.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go press this. When we press it, we wanna press it this way.
Okay.
So
Towards the center.
we're towards the center, so our peaks are here. So this is, again, another one of those things where I'm not pressing to the dark side. I can, but it's gonna create more here, more
Right.
bulk here, and I would rather not have that bulk there, and it's gonna help us when we do the sides.
Right.
Okay,
Okay.
okay, so again, we pressed so that we had a nice flat flying goose or geese on the back, and on the front, you know, we wanted to make sure we kept our points, right? So you're over a little bit, but that's okay for your first attempt.
Yeah.
That's where kind of just double checking if there is a little sliver that needs to come off, depending on the method that's used for making the flying geese. I'm off just a little bit on this side, but as long as we can see that point, that's what we're looking for, okay?
Okay.
So we'll set those aside so we can make our sides.
Alrighty.
And this doesn't really matter how we lay them out, because all we're doing is adding our 3, I want to say and a half. Let me do a quick measurement. 3.5, yay, my memory, to the short side of the rectangle. Okay, so I put mine on the board this way, upside down. And I'm gonna grab this piece so that you can see we press this one in. We're gonna press these out,
Okay.
okay? So let's go. And notice I made sure my points were there, so I knew I was pressing the right direction.
Right.
But that was just so we could see why we press these in, press these out. This will make nesting easier for final assembly.
Cool.
So we're gonna go back to right side. So we need our centerpiece.
Okay.
And we'll line up our sides. So again, not that way, like I just tried to do, but this way. And we have 2 seams that need to nest.
Right.
So when we flip it over, we're gonna nest those 2 seams first. So remember, right in there. And we'll clip those first. But you can see on this side, it's just gonna be a smidge,
Yeah.
right? So I just won't be able to line up that edge.
Right.
And then I always like to clip at least the center one. I'm usually happy on the ends because I can fix those as I go. Whee! And I got a little extra thread here, so I just want to get that out of my way.
Yeah, fair.
So you can see on this one, it came out a little extra, so that I can also just trim off when I'm done.
Yeah.
or before, but I'll usually just sew. All right.
Cool.
Let's go finish this up.
Let's do it.
All right. So we can press now. Which way do
Okay.
you think we should press?
Oh boy. Let's see. Are we gonna be popping our seams
We
here?
do not have to pop our seams on this one.
Oh, well, sweet. Maybe this way?
That's the way I would press, just because that way you get less bulk there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
All right, are you ready to reveal?
Let's do it.
Ta-da!
Oh, they're so pretty.
And so these should have come out to 12.5 by 12.5.
Cross your fingers.
Did we dare measure? Well, I'm
I'm a little
pretty
scared.
confident because these are 12 by 12 and we got a little bit of an overlap.
Okay,
so.
okay. Ooh, look at that. Pretty dang close.
That'll be good enough.
Yeah. You wanna try yours?
Please be right.
Nailed it.
Yep. So I got a little bit there, but that's fine. That will disappear
Yeah.
as long as we are real close for the rest of the assembly.
Awesome.
Cool. All right, so what did you think of the Sawtooth Star?
I think it came out really cute, and I mean, I think some of that is to do with the adorable fabric combinations on these ones, but they look great. I'm really happy with it.
And so you have a little bit of homework, right? You have to make one more of these and two more of these
That's right.
before we meet again. In our next episode, you are going to start assembly of your quilt. So we're going to lay everything out, all the blocks that we've made. We have the in-between white blocks to cut. They'll all be cut 12.5, and we'll lay it out and we'll start actually assembling it row by row.
Pretty exciting.
So you're getting really close to completing your quilt top, minus the quilting.
Yeah,
All
that'll
right.
be awesome.
We will have available for you in the comments below this video a one sheet on how to make the Sawtooth Star. So if you are sewing along with us, you'll have that. And also please post any pictures of your Sawtooth Star in the comments below as you finish those up. We'd love to see how yours are coming out. And I can't wait to see what your quilts are gonna look like when we get them all assembled.
They're gonna be beautiful.
They are going to be so beautiful and so fun to put together. I am a little sad though because this is our last block that we're
know.
making. But you got a twofer out of this one because you learned how to make the flying geese as well as the final block. So those are going to be some useful skills for you. If you do have any questions about this, also please feel free to put that in the comments below. So again, hope you loved this, hope you're inspired. Please like and subscribe to our channel for more like this. And until next time, please sew with love and grace.